As a freelance writer, I often worked late into the night in my small home office. The isolated house suited my introverted personality perfectly, and I relished having a space just for my writing. Often I would look up from my laptop, surprised to see dawn breaking outside my window. Sleep seemed like a waste of time when I was absorbed in crafting stories. I had moved here a year ago, eager to focus on my budding career away from the bustle of the city. The peaceful neighborhood was ideal, with wooded areas nearby that I enjoyed hiking during breaks from writing. At 32, I finally felt I was building the life I had always dreamed of. That all changed after the events of that terrifying night 3 weeks ago. It's been 3 weeks since it happened, but I still can't get the events of that night out of my head. No matter how hard I try, the memory haunts me. I was home alone, working late as usual. As an aspiring writer, I often lost track of time while immersed in my stories. Around midnight, I finally closed my laptop, ready to head to bed. That's when I first sensed something wasn't right, a creeping unease washing over me. I tried to shake it off as just being tired. I went upstairs and got ready for bed. As I was brushing my teeth, I thought I heard a floorboard creak outside the bathroom. I paused, listening closely. Silence. I told myself I was hearing things, but I couldn't ignore the nervous pit growing in my stomach. I hurried to my bedroom, double-checked the lock on my window, and slipped under the covers. I tossed and turned, unable to fall asleep. Each little noise made me flinch, the wind rustling the trees outside, the house settling. I couldn't relax. Sometime later, I jerked awake. I thought I heard footsteps downstairs. I sat bolt upright, straining to listen. There it was again, the distinct sound of a footstep on the hardwood floor. My heart raced. Someone was definitely moving around downstairs, being too quiet to be accidental. I crawled out of bed and crept to my door, careful to avoid the boards I knew would squeak. I turned the knob and pulled it open a crack. The hallway was dark and still. Holding my breath, I tiptoed forward, one slow step at a time. Reaching the stairs, I peered down into the inky blackness. A hulking, shadowy figure stood motionless by the front door. Terror seized me. I spun around and fled back to my room, nearly slamming the door behind me. With trembling hands, I dug my phone out of my purse and dialed 911. As I waited for them to arrive, I huddled in the corner, shaking uncontrollably. Who was this stranger in my home, and what did they want with me? Eventually, the police searched the house and found no one. But I knew what I saw. Someone had been there, watching me. The police chalked it up to an overactive imagination, but I knew this was only the beginning. I could feel eyes on me everywhere I went over the next few weeks. Popular spots I frequented now filled me with dread. I was certain someone was following me, tracing my every move. My friends said I was being paranoid, but the fear I felt was real. Some nights I still hear those creeping footsteps downstairs. I know he's out there, lurking, planning his next move. I realize now that I'm not safe anywhere. He won't stop until he gets me alone, and that's what terrifies me the most. One night, as I was getting ready for bed, I heard sirens and flashing lights outside. I rushed to the window and saw police officers surrounding my neighbor's house, guns drawn. To my shock, they dragged out a disheveled man I recognized. It seems like it's the same person that I saw in my house. He avoided eye contact as they handcuffed him and put him in the back of the squad car. I was simultaneously horrified and relieved. My fear now made sense. But it was over. The stalker had been caught and I could start to feel safe again. As an accountant at a busy firm, my life used to be pleasantly uneventful. I'd go to work each morning, grab an oat milk latte from the cafe next door, and settle in at my desk to tackle the never-ending pile of paperwork. After work, I'd head home to my cozy apartment, heat up a frozen meal, and unwind with some mindless reality TV before heading off to bed. It was a routine, ordinary life, but it was mine. I felt safe, comfortable, confident in who I was. But that sense of security vanished the moment I returned from lunch to find that rose and note waiting on my desk. In an instant, my uncomplicated life warped into a twisted game where I no longer controlled the rules or my own fate. I'll never forget that day. The day my life turned into a living nightmare. It started off like any other at the office, just a regular day of meetings and paperwork. But around noon, that's when things took a turn. I had stepped out to grab a coffee and sandwich from the cafe downstairs. When I got back, I nearly dropped everything. On my desk sat a single red rose and a note written in cut-out magazine letters that said, "I'm watching you." I looked around in a panic, but no one seemed to notice or care. Who could have gotten into my office and left this? Over the next few weeks, things only got worse. I'd find little gifts everywhere, in my car, tucked into reports on my desk, even placed right inside my apartment. No matter where I went, the feeling of unseen eyes followed me. At work, I tried to act normal, like I didn't notice the notes and photos appearing daily, but I could feel myself growing paranoid, jumping at every little sound. I stopped going out after work, instead rushing home to triple-check the locks. But even at home, I didn't feel safe. Things took an even more disturbing turn when I overheard two coworkers gossiping about a previous employee who had quit a few months earlier. They mentioned in hushed tones how she had supposedly been stalked by an unknown man for weeks leading up to her sudden resignation. I felt my blood run cold. Could my stalker be the same person who had targeted her? I couldn't stop thinking about the rumor. The police still refused to take any serious action without proof of who was behind this harassment. But if my stalker was the same person who stalked the previous employee, maybe this could provide evidence of an ongoing threat. One night, as I tossed and turned, I heard a crash coming from the kitchen. Heart pounding, I grabbed a bat and crept from my room. A window was shattered, glass all over the floor. The stalker had been inside my home. Any shred of security I had felt before was gone. The police kept telling me there was nothing they could do without evidence of who was behind it all. But I knew someone was meticulously destroying my life, bit by bit through these twisted games. I was certain that one day their harassment would turn even more sinister. At this point, I was a shell of my former self, impaired by severe anxiety and paranoia. I hardly recognized the frightened, unstable woman I had become. It was like starring in my own personal horror movie, alone and terrorized by some unseen villain. The next morning, as I walked through the parking garage, yesterday's creepy feelings came rushing back. I quickened my pace and kept looking over my shoulder until safely inside the building. Nothing seemed disturbed within my workspace. But when I went to the conference room to double-check my presentation setup, I spotted something that made my blood turn cold. Scrawled across the whiteboard in big, jagged letters were the words, "I saw you." My hands shook as I snapped photos of the writing with my phone. I sent them to my manager and HR rep, telling them I didn't feel safe being alone in the office anymore. They called an emergency meeting and allowed me to work from home for the next few weeks. And then, just like that, it stopped. No more notes, no more flowers, no signs of my stalker at all. The police tried to tell me I should be relieved it was over. But I knew better. This was only a temporary reprieve, the calm before the next storm. Even now, years later, I still can't shake the feeling of being watched. That stalker took so much from me, my sanity, my security, my very identity. I never found out who wrote that chilling messages or if they had been watching me work late at night. My company beefed up security measures and adjusted policies around office hours. As for me, I refused to work past sunset in an empty building ever again. The fear from that bizarre encounter stayed with me, making me vigilant about my surroundings for a long time after. I never could have imagined that a single disturbing act could unravel my entire sense of self. But as the harassment escalated, I felt myself changing in ways I hated. I jumped at shadows, doubted my friends, and no longer recognized the terrified woman in the mirror. My stalker didn't just torment me physically. They robbed me of the life I'd built, the person I used to be. Even now, I'm still struggling to reclaim my sense of self. Though the stalking stopped, feeling safe or normal again seems impossible after living through that nightmare. My name is Amy, and up until last year, I lived a pretty normal life. I'm a single woman in my late 20s, working an office job downtown. I have a small circle of close friends and family, and I've always felt safe in my cozy studio apartment. But that all changed when I suddenly found myself the target of a mysterious stalker. Last year was a nightmare I can't forget. Even now, thinking about it makes me shudder. At first, things seemed minor. I'd think I saw someone watching me or noticed stuff moved around my apartment. But it kept getting worse. The creepy phone calls started about a month in, some guy breathing heavy before hanging up. Then I started getting gifts, flowers, chocolates, stuff I liked. Never with a name, though. I changed my number, but the calls kept coming from blocked numbers. That's when I really started feeling like I was being watched 24/7. I'd spot someone lurking in the shadows outside my building when I got home at night. A figure ducking behind cars as I walked to mine. A knock at my door late one night, but no one was there when I got the guts to check. Strange scratches on my front door that weren't there before. I barely slept, obsessed with checking the locks and peeking through the blinds. I kept imagining footsteps on the stairs or shifting shadows under the door. The constant terror was completely wearing me down. The police felt bad, but said there wasn't much they could do without proof besides my paranoia. I stopped going out, afraid I was being followed everywhere. I felt like a prisoner in my own home. Then the messages started showing up. Notes slipped under my door or left on my car, all creepy and threatening, saying they were watching my every move. The police took it more seriously, but couldn't find any clues who was leaving them. I lost it one night when I woke up to banging on my bedroom window, scratching noises and cries like someone was trying to get in. I screamed and cowered in the corner, frantically calling 911. But by the time the cops arrived, the guy was long gone without a trace. I moved out the very next day, not telling anyone where I went. I live a quiet life in the suburbs now, keeping to myself. But when I'm out, I'm always checking behind me, afraid those stalking eyes are there again. I don't think I'll ever fully get over the fear from what happened. After I left, I heard from neighbors there were rumors of some stalker in the area targeting people in my building, but no one knew who or why. In the end, it didn't matter if the threat was real or in my head. The fear had already sunk in. I just couldn't risk staying there any longer.